Welcome, everybody, once again to another Landa Talks episode. This time with the amazing, great energy, Annamaria Pino, who's going to share a little bit of her experience doing consulting and transitioning from tech roles into consulting. And I guess just to start, Annamaria, would you mind telling us a little bit about you, your background? Who is Annamaria?
For sure. So, thank you so much for this invitation. I am Annamaria Pino. And fun fact about me is that when I was 9 years old, I arrived to Barranquilla, Colombia, where I'm based right now. And I had to learn Spanish and German at the same time. I am half Colombian, half Italian, and I grew up. I was born in Barranquilla. Then, when I was 1 year old, we moved with my family to Italy, to Genova, on the northern side of Italy. And I have no clue why, but when we arrived back to Colombia, when I was 9 years old, my parents decided they wanted me not to go to an Italian school, but to a German school. So I was like, "Hey, come on, you didn't have to do it that hard for me to learn two new languages at the same time." But what I take from here is that I think that combination gave me an amazing advantage as an entrepreneur, which is from the Colombian side, I have all this resourcefulness, the thing that we all need as entrepreneurs, and 5 more years in Germany. And from the German side, I got this obsession to control and monitor everything. And maybe this is why right now I am a consultant in growth metric for startups. And what I do is that I work closely with early stage founders to identify their key leading indicators that drive sales in their businesses.
I love that. It's a perfect pitch. And then one of the stories we always like to start with is what led you to this, right? Like how did you get that first client? That's always a big aha moment. And I think a lot of people here can get insights from it.
I remember it took me 18 WhatsApp messages to land that first client. So, and it was a role as head of ops, interim fractional head of ops. It was at a NetTech based in Berlin. I remember I was like, I had a little bit of a break, and then I used this. There is one methodology that I liked a lot, which is called Career Portfolio Framework. In case you haven't heard about that, there is a really good article on Harvard Business Review from April Ryan, where she explains like why we should aim to pursue a career portfolio rather than a career path. Long story short, it talks about like how we can identify all of our strengths and mix and match them, and then come up with new services. And this is how I did this whole framework. I created also a framework to do it. You guys can also have it. But for me, it was like one stage, it was how to craft my proposal as a fractional executive and how to land the job. So how to craft the proposal, it was with this methodology, like to understand like where am I really good at? What can I do? What can I provide to people? And then things like that. And the other part, how to land it, it was actually, of course, I didn't have a landing page. The closest thing to my landing page was my LinkedIn profile. But then I didn't want to send my LinkedIn URL because it gets messy. So I remember taking a screenshot to my LinkedIn profile, selecting some of the pieces, putting it all together, and then I sent that screenshot together with a WhatsApp message like, "Hey, look, I'm open to a fractional role. I can do this and this for you. I can organize all the growth metrics for your startups and things like that." Boom, send it to 18 people. And that's where I landed my first client. And to be fair, because we have to also like to to be fully transparent, that first client was actually an ex-colleague of mine. We worked together back in Colombia. Then he moved back to Germany. He founded his EdTech, where we created boot camps to train product managers, to train people on how to raise money and things like that. And then when I sent it to them, I was like, "Hey Thomas, look, I'm offering this new service." He was like, "I need that now, and come on, we have worked together, so there is no other person I could trust more than you structuring the metrics for my company." So I think it's important before even like we create any like beautiful bossy landing page, like personal brand landing page and things like that, and before we even start like flooding LinkedIn with "I'm doing this and I'm doing that," like start humble. Start with a screenshot. Start like just sending out messages to old colleague of yours. They know best how you work, and they for sure will get you, either they hire you or they get you landed in a really good position. So that was my story.
That's a great story, and also reinforces the fact of how important it is to kind of develop those relationships in time and build trust over time. I'm curious because you mentioned this framework, and I feel like the best thing that people can get out of this podcast is the most tactical kind of details, right? So I'm curious how you went about this framework in your case to land in this niche, like pursuing this kind of growth metrics niche, and if that evolved over time. Was that kind of like the first attempt and you landed on that first niche? Did that evolve? How did it kind of go about? And if you can give practical examples of how you did it, that would be great.
Sure. No, it wasn't the first thing that I launched and the thing that I'm doing right now. Actually, it was never meant to be at the beginning. Early stage founders, growth metrics, and so on. I just mentioned that I worked as fractional in this boot camp. So I got a lot of experience, like building boot camps and community and so on. So when I finished my role there, I was hired for, at the beginning, we said like, okay, stay for 4 months. I ended up staying for 8 months. We all know things happen in startups. And so when I left the startup, I was like, okay, I'm totally ready to launch my own bootcamp. I got the full experience. And also because, okay, I was working already, like for the past 5 years, I've been working with as mentor in KPIs, growth and leadership for Google, for Startup Accelerator, for Growth Rockstar, for Corporation Ventures, for the World Food Program
Mhm.
Accelerator from United Nations, which is based in Munich, and well, many other like accelerators in Latam, especially, and in Europe. So I was like, okay, I have all the experience. I want to start by promoting and launching a bootcamp. And my bootcamp was, the target group was a managers accelerator, because at the beginning I was like, okay, there are a lot of things for startup founders, a lot of things for like individual contributors, employees, but the second tier at startups, they are really like getting exhausted. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna direct my product, my bootcamp, to new managers in startups. So I did that. I launched my first early 2023. I launched my first bootcamp, and then I launched the second bootcamp, and then something funny happened. And the funny thing is, like, while I was preparing myself to launch the third bootcamp, and in the bootcamp, like the key topics were, first, metrics, second, psychological safety, and third, like lean operations. Those three. And the funny thing that happened is that I started receiving a lot of messages from founders telling me like, hey, I cannot make it to the bootcamp, but I want to have that on one-on-one sessions. Can you provide me like this service? And I was like, yeah, sure, 100%, I can. And in the end, I didn't launch my third cohort. because I got my first clients, like one-on-one direct clients, founders. And then I was like, okay, maybe I'll stay here. And this is what I do today.
And I guess like we also have a couple founders and ex-founders in this call, but I guess can you go a little bit deeper on your methodology for identifying those most critical metrics for early stage startups or people in this stage of their careers?
Sure. Usually when a founder comes to me, they are like, I am not really sure which KPI should I be tracking, because usually we know, like, we track sales, we track new customers, we track churn. But the thing here and the problem is that all those KPIs that I just mentioned are lagging indicators, are output indicators, are a result from processes that come before. What I do is to identify all the leading indicators that will alert you that you will be hitting your sales target. And to do that, I have a methodology that is called a metrics tree. This is basically, we all know this Ninja Excel file where we have the financial modeling. Sometimes this is like difficult to understand for everyone. Like, if you want to explain this to all of your employees and why this assumption moves this and that, but it's not that easy to like do the double click on the formula and move from here to there. What I did was like, okay, let's take the structure and the logic of this financial model and let's put it in a visual way so that everyone in the company can understand the hierarchy of the metrics. What are leading indicators? What are the output or the lagging indicators? Where are they in that hierarchy? How do they contribute? And this is what I call the metrics tree. And it's called metrics tree because in the end, it's like, this tree diagram. You always like open up the roots.
That makes
That's what
sense.
I do. So we do that. The first thing that we do within 4 sessions, we do the metrics tree, and later on we start prioritizing, because in the end, like, for one business line or something like that, we can end up to 50 metrics or something like that. But for sure, we are not going to monitor all of that. We need to prioritize. We are startups. It's not a matter of, I need more time to do stuff. No, founder, you don't need more time. We need more focus. And this is why out of the 50 plus metrics that we can have, we need to select in the end like 7, something like that, that you can monitor week by week. And this is the second deliverable that founders receive when working with me. We get these 7 key leading indicators that we'll be monitoring week by week. That's
That
how I
makes
do it.
that makes a lot of sense. And I guess one question that I'm curious about, because I'm also a founder, right? But where do we usually get it wrong, right? What are those common mistakes that you see people over and over making a mistake? Is it like what's going on? What are those key things that you see most often?
2 things. The first one is the one I just explained, that focusing only on lagging indicators, only on monthly recurring revenue, only on churn. Yeah, sure. But what, and even some kind of like North Star metrics tend to be lagging indicator. It's not because you have a North Star metric that you have to figure it out, but depending, I have a case of a founder. They are a marketplace where you can rent like machinery for construction workers and things like that. And they were like, yeah, we have our North Star metric is the number of hours that our machineries are rented. Yes, that's a fantastic way to frame it, and it's super powerful. And I was like, okay, let's complement this metric with other like leading indicators that will again lead you to that. So we keep this one as your top key output metric, lagging indicator. and we will complement with leading indicators. So the first thing is focusing only on lagging indicators. And the second, like most common mistake is I remember I received a LinkedIn message from a founder, and he was like, "Hey Anna, I just set up a meeting with you in 5 weeks because I wanted to gather some data before our meeting." And I was like, can you explain a little bit more? Yeah, it's not. I still not like getting all the metrics right and all the data, and I wanted to arrive to our meeting with like already data to analyze. No, 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 no. On the contrary, I mean, we don't need data to start understanding what are the key metrics that drive the growth of your business model. You can arrive having no data at all. Well, usually we have data, but not everything. And just with me, what we're going to do is we have to understand what are the key assumptions that will lead to growth. After that, you can start gathering the correct data. So, mistake number 2 is don't wait to gather data to start defining what are your leading indicators. I think those are the most common things.
Thanks for that. And then maybe I'll go a little bit more practical, but obviously everybody here is either aspiring to be a consultant or already venturing more like in a full-time fashion, but you're already on the second side. So I'm curious to hear what are Ana Maria's leading indicators to measure success week over week, month over month?
My conversion rates, like from lead to call, from call to client closed client. The second one that is super important to me is time to value. And for me, my time to value, imagine at the beginning, I mentioned that I have this program, the Metrics Accelerator program, that has like within 4 sessions, you'll get these two like deliverables that I mentioned. You'll get the clarity of which are your 7 top priority, your top growth indicators. And at the beginning, only up until session 3, sometimes 4, and I have to admit that I'm a little bit ashamed of that right now, but only up until the end is where people could have their aha moment, like, what? Finally, I got clarity. Yeah, you structured my mind. And I was like, okay, fine. But then I was like, come on, I cannot be preaching on time to value and that we have to shorten the time that it takes for us founders or for us startups to get the most wow experience, get our users to their most wow experience as fast as we can. And me, I'm delivering like the slowest time to value, like providing the wow moment at the session number 3 or number 4. So what I did now is like I'm making sure that in session 1, session 2, I have designed some special things where people like you get this practical advice or you can start implementing things right away.
That makes total sense. No, I love it. And I think that's something I think everybody can take from this conversation for sure. It's just prioritizing those types of indicators. I fully agree. I guess one question that I had, and this is the last one on your kind of specialty, and then I'll focus on fractional stuff that are also very practical. But I'm curious to hear, we've had a bit of a shift in the market, more geared towards sustainability versus very, very aggressive growth. So I'm curious to hear how you approach maybe growth differently for these kind of startups that are maybe like right now very focused on sustainability versus this maybe past mindset, which was, let's grow at all costs. So just that, how do you balance that aggressive growth mindset to keeping the sustainability of the business? I'm curious to hear your thoughts there.
On my side, what I do is, of course, we have all this growth metric on attraction, retention, and all these leading indicators. My granito de arena, let's say it like that, is always like, okay, keep in mind cost of acquisition. Keep in mind that. And also the way how you set the goals, please have a really good financial modeling consultant that help you find that balance. So, and I'm always recommending financial modeling consultants. And I know that there is a lot of people over here that have that expertise. So I know a lot of my founders sometimes sometimes need that service, like to complement it with mine, because mine is really focused, as you mentioned, like growth sales, growth sales. What I can do on my side is, okay, please, cost of acquisition and everything. And please find this financial modeling consultant that will help you keep things balanced.
Makes a lot of sense. And then I want to talk about balance here with one practical experience. And then you also share that you had an experience where you, I think, joined the team for a specific period of time. I think it was a fractional gig. And then they hired a full-time C-level executive, which is a little bit, it can be confusing, right? Because in a way you're balancing kind of like, maybe you're not balancing your long-term strategic goals because you want to get more money, but at the same time, like that's what the company wants. So I'm curious to hear, just in general, like how do you balance those short-term like operational needs, which might be like the client's needs, with your long-term strategic goals? Like, for example, in this case, how did you deal with that, I guess, like from a psychological standpoint, but also from a work standpoint?
First thing it was that it was all agreed from the beginning. When I started working with Thomas, we were like, okay, Anna, we need you. I need you for 4 months, and I will be looking for someone else. And I was like, Thomas, that's exactly my service. That's why. Well, sometimes, well, the thing is that maybe I'm using this word fractional, and like for me it has the same meaning as interim, but like if we are linguistically like clear, those are two different things. Fractional is that I can be working like 30% of my time in one startup, 30% of my time in another startup, and so on. For me, I've been always selling like the interim part. So in my case, it was set from the beginning that I would like do my job for 4 months, and then we extend. And then I also, it's like, hey, I since it was one good colleague of mine, well, I want your startup to succeed, of course. Like whenever you are like having all the interviews, I can help you. I can help you interview people. And so it was like a really like nice balance on that. And on the other side, like you do your job, right? And you'll get a lot of recommendations. So it's not about like how do I continue working with this startup, but in the end, like he has opened me the door to many other people. And but now you know what? The other thing that I'm doing, because let's say I have my fractional slash interim service. I have it stopped right now because I have many clients on the consultancy side on my program, my Metrics Accelerator program. But later, like a few months ago, I was like, okay, how can I increase my customer lifetime value with the founders that I am already working with? Because after 4 sessions, they're like, you're good to go. Bye. Choose. But then I was like, okay, what else can I provide? And then I have these other two services, and this is where the career portfolio comes to play. Like, what else can you offer? I came up with these two other services that are first, what I noticed when solo founders, especially solo founders, when solo founders hire me to do the first part, like clarity on the top key metrics, then they have to translate everything to the team. And then it takes some time. So what I do now is like I also like help as a advisor cool body to the team for the team to prepare their weekly meetings. So after they start with me, they need to start doing this weekly metrics meeting. And the founder has two options. Either the founder does it by themselves. They provide the clarity for the team, like you should be measuring this, and also how do you get to the insights, what are the next steps and things like that. It takes a lot of time to do that until people are fully onboarded. So I was like, okay, I can do that for you. So you can hire me and I train your second tier of leadership. So that's one service. And the other service is having me as an like advisory board.
Like
Yeah,
an advisory board. Yes.
exactly. Exactly. So you have me as an advisory board. So we don't need to meet every week, but like twice a week, once a month, things like that. We come together and I help to understand how the metrics are going. Sometimes it's like only you and me, and sometimes the startups have the full advisory board and then we meet all together. And this is also something really interesting because startups will think about like, why should I do that? But in the end, if you're already thinking about looking up for funding, when you get the funding and everything, you will end up having this board meeting, like with a formal one, and you have like other type of responsibilities and things like that. With this first stage advisory board, you're preparing yourself to get to an advisory board, like a formal one later on, which will make you way more sexier to investors. So that's so I was thinking at first, how can I extend my time to value from the clients that I have? And at the beginning, it was like, no. So once I'm done, I'm done. And I'm like, okay, I came up with two other services. So that's the balancing of short-term needs and what other long-term needs can we create.
I agree. I think it's very aligned to their incentives as well. And I think like that's the only way to make relationships this day. I'm curious to hear because in this case you're trying to upsell, and that's the ultimate goal is like you want to keep adding value to your customers, and that adds value to you. But in some cases there's just no need, right? So I'm curious to hear maybe practical tips on how you maybe offboard a customer, right? Like I don't need like any of these options. Do you have like some sort of NPS survey? Do you ask for referrals? What are some tips you might give us when maybe a client doesn't want to work with you again, and it's not related necessarily to performance? He just doesn't need the service anymore.
Great. So I'll come back to that question in just a second because I just realized I missed something. Let's say that I started like offering my fractional service. And then I migrated to the consultancy. And then from the consultancy, I want to upgrade. And I told you I can upgrade by working with the team. I can upgrade by being part of the advisory board, but also I can upgrade by becoming the fractional advisor to that startup. It hasn't happened yet, right now, but in the end, I understood that it would be easier for me to offer my fractional services to someone who already worked with me. And so my lead generation strategy to have more fractional clients is to have them go through my first like metrics accelerator program. So that's another way. And also you don't always I guess I got lucky because a really amazing colleague of mine hired me from at the beginning. But what if you offer your services and then you realize, oh God, these people are like, I can't work here, or you don't know how the people are and the reaction and the culture and everything. You don't want to spend a lot of time with those type of people. But then if I can choose, who do I offer my fractional services to, then that would be for me a better option. So my advice here would be like, I know some of us are focusing on the fractional service, but maybe try to create an entry level service that will help you as lead generation, and that will help you also for you to scan with whom you would like to work with in your interim or fractional role.
That's great. I think that's a great tip, and I haven't thought about this too often myself even. So yeah, thanks for that. And I guess just going back to that question, like
Yeah.
when you offboard clients, like is there a process you follow? Because I feel like that's something that I feel some people don't get right the first time. In this case, most people here are first time consultants. They're going to have their first couple clients. So how do you avoid that mistake? Like, what's been your experience, kind of offboarding clients? Is there a process that you follow with them to make sure potentially in the beginning they might lead to another project, or at least potentially get you new referrals?
What I always do at the end of every session, I have 4 sessions, and at the end of every session, I ask, what was the most valuable thing you got out of this session? So I collect all of that, and then since I record everything, because, well, my founders keep the recordings and things like that. So then what I do is like, I cut these little clips, make it into one, and then look, for you to always remember the most valuable things that you haven't. And with that, people are like, oh, wow. And in case you need to recommend me to someone else or something like that, is you can just forward that 4 minutes clip or something like that, and other people will know, like, oh, that's what you work with her, and that's what the value that you got and everything like that. It's not always about how to make it easier for people to recommend you. And this I found to be a good system. So that on that side. And the other thing is like, I honestly, Gabriel, I leave it pretty casual and not pushy. And right now, what I'm doing lately is I'm starting to collect the case studies and trying to put that in a beautiful way to share that. But I also need to improve on that. But that's my way.
That's amazing. But just any last tips you would give to anybody who's just starting out and aspiring to be a consultant or a fractional?
My tip would be try to position yourself in accelerators that will get you the PR and the brand name and the recognition of your work. Like, let's say you join an accelerator, and sometimes they pay you, sometimes it's pro bono. We know that. Of course, at the beginning, you will do a lot of things pro bono. In the end, so later on, you will find accelerators that start paying for your services. But the pro bono things are such a good and important thing to do because of 2 things. First, the easiest one, they get you PR. Second, you can't imagine how many times I have tested my methodologies with the founders that belong to this accelerator. So whenever I want to test a new thing, I'm like, okay, let's see if I offer them this tool, or I created a new. At the beginning it was the metrics tree, then the metrics tree with HR part. Then it was lately, I was like, okay, so they are always struggling, like setting goals. When I ask what's your sales goal, or what's the goal that you had on number of calls per week or something like that, it's always, I don't know, something around that. And I'm, okay, let's do reverse engineering. What are the conversion rates? So I designed a quick formula on a Google Sheet, and I call it like the acid test. It's like a reality shock, like with the expectations that you have, with the leads that you have, how many clients will you end up having? And this little Google Sheet, I tested in some of my advisories, and now I really need to integrate this thing into my full program. So for me, whenever you get this opportunity to work with accelerators, being that paid or pro bono, use those spaces as a testing ground for your methodologies so that you later on can sell them.
I agree. And eventually, if those founders end up being successful, they'll already think of you. That's I think like a very, very good tip to end. And I know a lot of people here are mentors for Founders Institute, Tyrant Startups. So I think it's a great tip to end the conversation. I just go into the quick questions format, Ana Maria. I wanted to start with the first one being, what is your favorite book? I'm curious. The one that has impacted you the most, or maybe the one that you give the most to other people?
I have to admit that I'm really in more than not that I'm really into stand-up comedy. So if I had to like to recall something that has impacted me or that I really like or things like that, it's more about like stand-up comedy than well, there are a lot of books for sure, but yeah, for me it's about stand-up comedy. And actually, why that also? Because last year I got challenged by a conference to give my to present my the pitch of my business, so my business pitch in a stand-up comedy format. And
Mm,
it was amazing. It was super funny. They provided me with a real stand-up comedian, a Colombian stand-up comedian that worked with me 5 hours to craft my pitch and my story in the stand-up setting way, and it was just amazing. I'm gonna share the link of that. It's like a 8 minute stand-up pitch. It was so cool. So I from them I learned a lot of things: how to tell your story in other ways, and how to get personal. Because in the end, stand-up comedians they always like share personal things, and maybe in our pitches we don't share that quite often. The first time that I watched stand-up comedy is like to laugh, and the second time that I watch the stand-up comedy shows is to get the key structure and tips and practical advice on how to create that narrative. So I really like that.
I
And
love it.
implement that into to your pitch.
I love it, and I guess it might be a good segue for the second question, which is it's around habits, right? Like maybe it's around something that you learned during that phase of learning how to do a stand-up comedy show. But is there a habit that you practice, I guess, like on a daily basis that's helped you be more successful in your career? It might be like around pitching, whatever.
Yeah, what I do is, let me show you. Every day I do this 5 minute journal. It's not something that I made up. It's something from Tim Ferriss. I remember I read that from him. And it's about 3 sections. I use everything that I have, like in hand. So the first section is always like, I'm grateful for all the little things, even the birds singing. I'm super happy. I'm super grateful for the birds singing like early in the morning. Then today, what will I be accomplishing today? And well, here you are, guys. Yeah, Landa Talks.
Thank you.
And it is like the most important thing that I discovered doing this is to structure this in 3 categories. The first category is health and fitness. The second category is personal, and the third category is work. What happened to me 3 years back, I was always only focusing on work. And then I promised myself I would make sure I put some space for personal things and for health and fitness every day. So now, of course, you see that the work like column is a little bit longer, but at least I have some things in the other two. And those things could be calling my mom and talking to my mom for half an hour or something like that, making sure that I visually uh, make some space for those goals. So that's the second thing. Like the first is what I'm grateful for. The second thing is today I'm gonna accomplish, and then the third thing I am, and it's always like a lot of what type of qualities, values, and character traits do I need today to accomplish what I want to do. So that has been for me like game changer. I mean, thank you, Tim Ferriss, for that.
I love it. We're big fans of Tin as well. And then just to close off, and I promise I'll leave some space for the audience to make questions. But is there something that you would like to be remembered for? Like one thing that you say, like, looking back, thinking about like, Ana Maria, I remember her because of black.
I don't know. I think we
Very
need to meet again in a few other like Landa session. This is Landa session number 17. I think let's meet in like 10 more session and like get your answer.
it can evolve. It can be a whole episode, probably. Well, thank you again, Ana Maria. This has been great. A lot of very practical tips.